We're back on MorningLine. Thanks for joining us. We're talking this morning about animal rescues, Animal Rescue Corps. It is exactly what they do. This is Scotland Hazley, the president and founder of ARC over the last 6 years. Led quite an interesting life before that when you really became dedicated to your life to making things better for animals.
Yeah,
and
a long time.
You're vegetarian, you're vegan.
Yeah.
You know, and he's written a book, and I've got it here, and there it is, Compassion in Action, just out. And I wanted to plug this for you. I don't plug too many things on this show, but this book is kind of, if you would tell me, you've never been about profit, making money. There have been, as you've said in the past, television production companies that have wanted to come and travel with you and get inside on these rescues, and you're very hesitant to do anything like that. It's not about money for you unless it's money to help your cause. What's this book about?
Thank you for saying that. That is very true. It's not about money for me. I think my wife wishes it was, but it's not. This book is raising money for us. In fact, we sell this through Animal Rescue Corps online. You can purchase it anywhere, Barnes & Noble, Amazon. But if you buy it directly from Animal Rescue Corps, all proceeds go to Animal Rescue Corps. Thank you. This book is about everything.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
from the beginning and how you got involved.
Even earlier than that, my childhood and how I got involved. But I wanted to give my supporters insight as to how I became who I became and what drives me. Clearly, what drives me is compassion. But I'm inspired. You know, there are quite a few people that inspire me, and I talk a lot about them in this book. I talk a lot about our rescue work, talk a little bit about my childhood. It was a humbling experience to write this book.
You know, most people, I think, out there are good people. They love animals, and they don't like to see anything abused. Was there an incident or something that put you on this path to what you're doing to make it your life's work? Something where you came across and you just said, enough's enough, I've got to dedicate myself to this?
There are, there are a few major events in my life. The first one being, I think I was around 10 years old, and I was in the backyard of a friend of mine's house, and we were out there shooting a BB gun. And I grew up in California, in the Los Angeles area, and we were just out there shooting. I was aiming, and I aimed my sights at a sparrow in a tree, and he said, "Go ahead and pull the trigger." And I said, "Can I? I'm allowed to?" And he said, "Sure, go for it." And so there I was, feeling high and mighty, and had all the power in the world in my hands, and I aimed, and really there was no thought process other than, I can do this, let's do it. I pulled that trigger, I hit him, he fell branch to branch. There he laid flailing on the ground, suffering, blood everywhere. And I went from here feeling very strong, very powerful, to very weak and very sorry, and very empathetic to this animal that I just, for no reason, put through a great deal of suffering. I picked him up, and I'm sorry it's to be so graphic, but you asked, and I believe in transparency, and my friend said you had to put him out of his misery, and I said, how do I do that? And he said, gestured a bottle cap, and I did, and I got it. It was at that very moment where I truly understood compassion, ironically, in this horrific event, this horrific event that I caused. I learned from it. And from that point on, when I rescue an animal, I think of that bird whose life I took for no reason whatsoever. And
I think a lot of people have had, just as you say that, my brother, same thing. He did the same thing. Felt awful after the fact, but it's permeated. A lot of people go through that. For instance, I'll have a hamburger. You don't eat any meat.
No.
And that's part of the reason. It's not a health reason for you. It's not something. It's because you don't wear leather. Because there's suffering involved.
I understand. When I started as a humane officer in Washington, D.C. in 1990, 16 years ago, and I'm sorry, 26 years ago.
I was right. How old are you?
26 years ago. I knew right away this is what I was meant to do. I mean, just weeks on the job. I mean, I was given the keys to a van to go out and rescue the animals of our nation's capital. What a privilege that was. And to this day, I'm very honored to have the responsibility of rewriting the destiny for animals. And I take that very seriously. But on one of my first calls, it was a Santeria. I think I may have told you this story on your show before. It was a Santeria sacrificial seance of chickens.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there were chickens in the backyard, and they were getting their heads cut off, and that's illegal in the District of Columbia. I seized the chickens. I went about my day and continued to rescue animals. When I got back to the shelter that night, I was unloading my van. I unloaded the chickens. I asked my boss what was going to happen to the chickens. She said she was going to put them to death. And I said, why? Is there no option for them? Can't we adopt them out? Can't we send them to a sanctuary?
Farm or something, yeah.
And she said, well, there's a sanctuary, but it's an hour outside of the city, and I have no way to get them there. Well, of course, I raised my hand and offered, and she said yes. And as I was driving the chickens out there, I hadn't eaten all day. I was starving. I pulled over to the Kentucky Fried Chicken. And there I was with a box of fried chicken in my lap and these live chickens squawking in the back. And the connection couldn't have been more clear.
Like, what am I doing here?
What am I doing? And that was it.
You have so many more stories, and a lot of them in the book. Let me take a few phone calls for folks, because some have waited through the break. We'll go, and I think we just lost Sean, but you can call back and we'll take him. But let's go to Joe. Joe, good morning, Joe.
Good morning, Nick.
Hey.
I just wanted to tell Jim I really appreciate what he's doing. Those animals can't speak for themselves, as everyone knows. But one of the things I was glad to hear him say that law enforcement is working with him and calling him, and hope there's some other people on these puppy mills and people that's supposedly in the rescue business, but really is not. But Tennessee, he can maybe address this better than I. They don't really have any teeth in their laws for animal abuse. And I know we've had several cases where they've caught these people and caught them more than one time. They don't really do anything to them. So we'd like to see more teeth in the law for abuse. One other quick thing is I have saw and witnessed some people that go and adopt animals from shelters and different places, and then after they adopt these animals, they abuse these animals. So I wish there was some way to do a little background on who's adopted animals, and rather than just give them to anybody and everybody, because sometimes they wound up in a worse condition than they were in to begin with. Thank you so much, and the best of luck, and I'm glad you're doing this.
Hey, thank you, Joe, for your call.
And thank you for your support, Joe.
Yeah.
Joe gets it.
He's got a good heart, and he's right. What is your observation on the laws here in Tennessee or in any of the other states you've been through?
You know, it's interesting. As you know, just this year, a National Registry for Animal Abusers in the state of Tennessee was created, the first to be created. It really doesn't, it has nothing to do with us for the most part, because most of the, in fact, all of the cases that we have done in Tennessee to date have been misdemeanor animal cruelty. The registry is only for felony. Felony convictions.
How does it become a felony on animal cruelty? Would be what type of abuse?
So there's two types of felony convictions for animals. One is dog fighting, and the other one is aggravated animal cruelty.
It'd be like torture. Oh God! Yes. And that happens,
And that certainly happens, and that's very difficult to prove. I mean, you've got to prove that somebody maliciously intended to harm an animal or kill an animal. Obviously that happens, and we will have that case, and we will have felony convictions in the state of Tennessee. But again, the registry has little to do with Animal Rescue Corps' work until we have a felony.
Well, we'll go to the break. When we come back, Jay, Bob, and others will get to your calls. The number is 737-7587. As we do go to the break, let me just say, with one thing in my personal experience here, Joe, with regard to the adoption out of animals, I think the animal shelters with the cities and municipalities do the best they can to get some background. But if you go through some of these rescues, boy, they're running TBI background checks on you. They're meeting you personally. They bend over backward to make sure that you're going to be a good owner for these dogs that they're adopting out to you. And I'm talking about some of these private rescues that do this for different breeds of dogs. in my experience, they do a very, very good job vetting you to the point where almost you feel as though, wow, are you going a little over the top? But for them, no. They want to make sure the animal ends up in a good home. So they're doing that. We'll take a break, be back with more of your calls and more of our conversation with Scotland Hazley about ARC right after this.
This is a